Agoria is very proud to present to you three of the most influential foreign thinkers on the new economy and the new labor market. They are not present here. They are at their working place, but we will have contact with them. And we start off with our keynote speaker, who is Andrew McAfee. Professor McAfee, I should say. He is in Boston, and you all know what's in Boston. That's MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology. He is an MIT scientist. He studies how technological process changes business, the economy, and society. And we can already see him. Good afternoon, Professor McAfee. Something more on you. He is co-author of a best-selling book called The Second Machine Age, and also co-founder of the MIT Initiative on the Digital Economy. Professor McAfee, thank you very much for joining us. How are you?
I'm well, thank you for inviting me.
I'm very good. It's very good that you can hear us. We can see you and we can hear you. Professor, future jobs, future economy, that's what you are studying. Please enlighten us on what the evolutions will be, might be, and what the chances are.
Excellent. I'd like to do three things with my remarks today. First of all, talk about the recent past and a couple of the trends that we see. Second of all, talk about what's likely to happen in the near future. What's going to happen with jobs and wages, especially in this era of pretty remarkable technological progress. And then third, what kinds of policies, what kinds of things can we do to shape the future in a direction that we would find productive, we would find healthy, as opposed to a less healthy version of the future. So let me start by talking about where we've been basically for the entire history of the industrial age. Let's say that we've had 230, 240 years worth of the industrial age. And for about the first 200 of those years, the pattern was really, really clear. And it was that the forces of industry, these free market systems that we created, especially in North America and Western Europe, these had a huge, huge thirst for labor. They needed lots of workers. They needed lots of jobs, so much so that for a while we were employing children in our factories until we decided that was a morally unacceptable thing to do. But for years, for decades, even for centuries, we created tons of jobs, and the pattern was very clear. They were better jobs over time. They paid more. They allowed people to have a higher standard of living. Eventually, they generated the large, stable, prosperous middle class that we have enjoyed both in the countries of North America and Western Europe. So the pattern was an incredibly optimistic, a really happy pattern. And then what we've noticed is not just since the end of the Great Recession, but even before then, over the past 20 to 30 years, the pattern appears to have changed. And the pattern I find to be more consistent than more different across the countries of North America and Western Europe. Even though there are some differences, I am more struck by the similarities. And the similarities have to do with two phenomena. First of all, the engine of job growth slowing down. And it has not completely come to a stop. We are still generating jobs every year in most of the countries of North America and Western Europe, but we're not generating them at the same rate that we did previously. So you can notice kind of a slowdown in the raw rate of job creation. And when I look at the unemployment figures for European countries, I see that very clearly, especially the youth unemployment figures, the people who are just trying to enter the workforce. In America, our overall unemployment rate is not as high, but we notice a different phenomenon, which is a larger number of people deciding not to be in the workforce at all. In other words, they're not looking for work, they don't have a job, and they're not looking for work. So again, this idea that the job growth engine has slowed down, this is a pattern that we see in a lot of the evidence. The other part of the pattern is that the jobs that we are generating are not the same as the ones we were generating in the past. In the decades after the end of World War II, as I said earlier, the countries of Europe and North America generated a wonderful, large, stable, prosperous middle class, and we generated a lot of middle class jobs. What we're noticing over the past couple decades is that we're doing, in some countries, a pretty good job of generating jobs up at the high end, jobs for top-level managers, for executives, for technologists, for professionals like doctors and lawyers. We still need those. We're also doing a pretty good job of generating low-end jobs, jobs like a cook in a restaurant or a gardener or a night watchman in a factory, things like that. We're still generating those. What's been happening, though, is that the middle, this classic middle class, has been getting hollowed out, and the jobs have been heading in both directions, up and down. Unfortunately, as we look at the evidence, it seems that we're doing a better job of creating jobs down at the low end than up at the high end. And that helps explain why the average incomes in most countries in North America and Europe have flattened out. They're not increasing anymore. And by some measures, they're actually going down slowly over time. So we have a job creation challenge, and we have a job quality challenge. We have a job and a wage challenge. And that's been the fairly clear pattern over the past 15 to 20 years. It has accelerated since the end of the Great Recession. Since 2008, 2009, these patterns have become more clear and more visible in the evidence. The second question is, what's likely to happen in the future? And to understand that and to try to answer that question, we have to understand why that pattern has been going on for the past 15 or 20 years. And there are several explanations for what's been happening to jobs and wages around the world. And they have to do with globalization. Some people believe that opening up trade around the world is a big contributor. Some people believe that the nature of capitalism itself has changed, and that essentially capitalism has been hijacked by, we hear about the 1%, or the 1% of the 1%. We hear that the economies have become financialized and the banks are perverting the rest of the system. There are a number of explanations going on. The one that I want to concentrate on, and the one that I think is a major contributor to what's happening, is technological progress. And very simply, as digital technologies can do more and more, we need human labor to do less and less. So I believe that the two major forces that are reshaping economies around the world and changing jobs and wages, particularly in rich countries like America and Belgium, the two major forces are globalization and technological progress. And of those two, I think technological progress has been underappreciated. I also think it's only going to become more powerful as we move into the future for reasons that I'm going to talk about. So what do I mean by technological progress? It's simply the notion that as we build more and more capable digital technologies, the need for different kinds of human labor diminishes. And historically, technology has not been able to do very many of the things that a person can do. Historically, technology was never able to listen to speech like this, understand what I'm saying, understand what I want, and give it to me. Our computers, our digital technologies were pretty lousy at pattern matching, at picking out subtle patterns from huge amounts of information. And our digital technologies were pretty bad at dealing with very dynamic, very fluid, very fast-changing situations. So if you had a task that didn't change very much over time, was pretty simple to describe, and you could just execute it over and over again, we already gave those jobs to technology. We've been doing that for decades. So if you go look around a modern factory today, you don't see very many people because that work is very routine. We gave that routine physical work to technology. If you go look in the offices of a manufacturing company, you really don't see very many people anymore because all the clerks who are responsible for inventory and accounting and jobs like that, we've given those jobs to technology as well. So the question is that pattern going to continue? And the reason I believe it is going to continue and that it's actually going to accelerate is because we now have technologies, and this is a very recent development. It's only a few years old. We now have technologies that can do all those things that technology could never do before, and therefore we used to need human beings for it. Technologies exist today that can understand speech just like I'm saying it now, accurately transcribe it, figure out if there's a question or a request in that, and then satisfy that request. We have technologies that are amazingly good at pattern matching. I believe, for example, that if the world's best medical diagnostician today is not a piece of technology, it will be fairly soon. And one of the most remarkable triumphs that I saw recently was the victory of an artificial intelligence, a machine learning system, over the human champion in the strategy game of Go. The human champion played a 5-game match against a Go playing piece of software in Korea in March of this year, and the technology won 4 games to 1. The reason that is particularly important is that there is no human being who can explain how to play Go at a very high level. And that sounds like a completely ridiculous statement. After all, there are human beings playing Go at a very high level. The problem is they can't explain how they do what they do. This problem was really beautifully summarized by a philosopher named Michael Polanyi of the last century. He said, "We know more than we can tell." And when you look around at high-level human abilities in lots of different domains, you see this phenomenon over and over again, that the person cannot explain how they do what they do, what strategies they're following, what rules they're following. Now, in the old world, this used to mean that there was a hard barrier on the kinds of work that we could give to technology, the kinds of work that we could automate. If nobody could explain the rules, we could not program those rules into software. What's different now, and what we learned from that victory of a Go playing piece of software over the human Go champion, is that we are now able to build technologies that can learn on their own. This is the field of machine learning that we hear about. And we have the ability now, we've demonstrated the ability to build technologies where if you show it enough examples, and the Go playing software was given 2,500 years worth of high-level Go games. If you give these technologies enough examples, they will understand the patterns, they will understand the productive rules and the strategies themselves. They don't need to be taught by a human being anymore. This is a big difference. We have not been here before. This is a very recent development, and we don't know exactly what the implications are going to be. But what I see as I look into the future is technology acquiring human level, or even in many cases, superhuman level abilities in jobs that used to belong to human beings alone. Jobs that involve pattern matching, jobs that involve very complex kinds of communication, jobs that involve more fluid, more fuzzy and more dynamic kinds of reasoning. And all of these technologies are coming into the economy more quickly than we thought 10 years ago, even 5 years ago. As we've gone around and done research for our books and for our other work, I've noticed the same phenomenon over and over again, which is the technologists themselves, the people who are developing these new tools, keep on saying to me, I was not expecting progress this fast. We just see it happen over and over more quickly than we were expecting. There were articles written in 2014 and 2015, for example, saying that the Go champion supercomputer was probably at least a decade away. Here we are in 2016, we have that technology now. I got a ride in one of Google's autonomous cars in 2012, and I thought it was an amazing experience. I went for a test drive in a Tesla electric car last month. That car will drive itself completely autonomously down the highway. So 4 years later, we went from kind of a laboratory or a really high-end demonstration to a commercially available technology. I just want to reinforce this notion that technological progress is fast. It's faster than most of us believed even 5 years ago, and I believe it's still accelerating. So we're going to see a lot of new technologies come into the economy. We're going to see a lot of technology taking over tasks and jobs that used to belong to human beings. So what's the right response to this kind of situation. The first thing to say is that the wrong response is to try to stop or slow down the pace of technological progress. Economists say that technological progress is the only free lunch that we believe in. Technological progress makes us richer, makes our economies more abundant, allows us to have better quality lives, better health care. It's a wonderful gift to our lives and to our economies. So the last thing we want to do is try to stop or slow down technological progress. So what's the right way to think about smart policies and smart moves for this future that we're creating? I think we need to keep two things in mind. The first is that nobody is in charge of the economy. I talk to a lot of people who say, well, we just need to do the following three things and that will fix all of these job and wage problems. I wish it were that simple. Our economies are incredibly uncontrolled, decentralized places. The government is one big actor in the economy, so we can put in place policies that take us in the right direction or the wrong direction, but we need to give up this idea or this philosophy that we have some kind of centralized control over the future, over the pace of technological progress, or over how the economy is going to proceed into the future. The second thing that I want to stress is that with the decisions that we make and with the policies that we put in place, we have, I think, a fairly clear choice. We can try to protect the future from the past, or we can try to protect the past from the future. And I think it's a really easy choice. I want to protect the future from the forces of the past because I believe the future that we're creating is a more prosperous, more abundant future. However, when I look around, I see a lot of attempts to protect the past from the future. And what I mean by that is I see a lot of attempts to protect the incumbents, to protect the people who are already there. And by incumbents, I mean the companies who are already dominating in a market. We all know that they can very often try to put in place laws and regulations and policies that benefit them and stop the disruption, stop the turbulence in their particular markets and try to preserve their position. At the same time, I see a lot of efforts to try to protect the people who have jobs today. And I understand that impulse. It's a very, very logical impulse. In a time when jobs are under threat, the temptation is there to try to protect the people who already have jobs. The problem is, it's not going to work very well. And it's an example of trying to protect the past from the future. If we take the other approach and we try to protect the future from the past, the main thing that we do is we try to let the engine of the free market, the engine of the economy, do what it has done pretty well for 200 years, which is make us wealthier overall and generate jobs, generate wages. And if we're not happy with how that's going, if we think that job growth isn't high enough, if we think that wage growth isn't high enough, I believe our job is to try to get out of the way, remove some of the barriers, remove some of the obstructions to entrepreneurship and innovation and dynamism, and let the engine do what it does. Now, if all that happens, and we're still not happy, if we've done our best efforts, and we're still not happy with the pace of job growth or wage growth, then we know that there are things we can do to help workers out, to help people out. One of my favorite policies is something we're discussing in the United States right now, which we call the Earned Income Tax Credit or the negative income tax. And what that means is if you're a worker and you're offering your skills to the economy, but because of whatever factors, you don't have a great wage, the economy does not value that work enough to let you support a lifestyle and a family, great. Let's use taxation, let's use policy to increase your income a little bit. The reason I believe that in policies like that is I have concluded, based on my research, based on the research of a lot of other people, that work is a really important thing for an individual and for a community. I always go back to a quote that came from one of the great sages of the European Enlightenment, Voltaire, who said that work saves us from three great evils: boredom, vice, and need. And when I look around at the communities where work has gone away, I see a lot of social problems. I think it's responsible for a lot of the social ills that we see. So because of all of this, I'm a big fan of people having jobs, work, the dignity, the values, the connections that come along with that. So what I want to do with our policies going forward is, again, remove the barriers, remove the restrictions to innovation and entrepreneurship, and try to put in place as many direct incentives, as much encouragement as possible for people to get out there, to be involved in the labor force, to be involved in the economy, and to keep offering their labor. Because the robots are not about to take all the jobs in the next 5 years, even the next 10 years. So I don't think that's the future that we need to be preparing for right now. We need to be preparing for a future where technology is racing ahead, and we need to increase the speed of our other institutions to keep up with technology. The last thing that I want to say to this audience, and again, thank you for allowing me to join you today. The last thing that I want to say to this audience is that we should be optimistic about the future that we're building. It is a future of greater prosperity, of greater material abundance, of better health, of higher quality lives. We know these things are coming because of technological progress. Our homework and our job in this world that we're creating so quickly is to think about what our values are as people, as members of a society, and make sure that those values are reflected in the policy choices. The technologies are not going to dictate our values. Our values need to be dictating what kind of world, what kind of society we create. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor. Thank you very much, Professor McAfee, for these challenging thoughts. I might have two questions. I noticed that you haven't used the word factory once. Should we forget about traditional industry then?
We shouldn't forget about traditional industry, but we should walk away from the notion that it is going to be a source of lots of jobs going forward. I'll talk about America for a second. People talk about the decline of manufacturing in America. That's not accurate. America is a manufacturing powerhouse. We have a bigger and bigger manufacturing industry when you measure it by output every year. However, we have a smaller and smaller number of people employed in manufacturing every year. It's a productivity story. We have lots of output with less and less labor over time. So the idea that we're going to restore employment by bringing lots of manufacturing back into North America and Europe, it's just not going to happen. We should support manufacturing like we should support all other kinds of productive activity. But factories are not going to be big buildings full of lots of middle-class workers in Belgium or America, or in another couple generations, even in China. The robots are going to work more cheaply than the workers everywhere in the world before too much longer.
Okay, and then one more question, Professor. You say government is a big actor. It has to remove the barriers and try to protect the future from the past. Now, from your view, is Europe doing a good job at this, or does this image of Europe lagging behind, is that correct?
I think Europe is doing a great job in some things. In particular, I like some of the social safety net policies that I see in Europe, where we don't think that the poor or the people without work are bad or they're lazy and therefore they deserve to be left behind. That's not the philosophy that I see in Europe. And this notion that I get more often when I visit Europe, that we're all in this together and we need to decide our values as a community, I like that a lot. On the other hand, I do see more efforts to protect the past from the future. And this is just my impression. I see more efforts to protect incumbent companies. I see more efforts to protect incumbent job holders. And I just think that what that's going to yield is a shrinking, a pool of people and jobs and prosperity, an island of that shrinks over time, and more people excluded from that kind of participation. I just don't think that's a smart approach in this world that we're creating so quickly.
Okay, clear message to remember. Thanks again, Professor McAfee. Thank you.